afternoon for folks joining in. We're going to give about 60 seconds here to let folks get into the room, and then we'll kick things off. All right, got some folks in here. So we'll get started. Hi, everyone. This is JW, go-to-market manager with Entytle. As always, we're going to expect our Aftermarket Transformation Thursday event to run close to about 30 minutes today. And we have a great topic for you today on how to capture maximum aftermarket wallet share. So with that, we'll move to the rules of the road. Okay, please use the Q&A area for questions for our speakers. You will find the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, along with all the other buttons on your Zoom bar. There's a chat button there you can use to raise any technical issues over the course of the event. And the recording for this and event deck will be available after the event. Moving on to introduce our speaker of the day, Vivek Joshi. Vivek is the CEO and founder of Entytle. He has decades of experience working on both sides of the industrial equation. He is passionate about all things install base and simplifying install base workflows to give customer-facing OEM teams an opportunity to do more with less. Vivek is also the founder of Industry Next Community, which is designed to help all industrial leaders share and learn from one another. And with that, Vivek, I will turn over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, JW. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Great to have all of you on board again today. We've been doing this series now for a few weeks now. And what's interesting about it is that we always have a backlog of topics we want to cover. There's some of these are how-tos, some of these are why-tos, and so on and so forth. And every now and then we wind up with customer and prospect discussions which spark some ideas. And in this case, this topic today came up from a discussion I had last week. We've been talking to lots of different companies. One of them in particular is an instrumentation company that serves bio labs and other places. And I was talking to the CEO. This is a mid-sized company. I was talking to the CEO last week about some of the things they're trying to do. And he said something interesting to me, saying, Vivek, we've been at this journey for a few years. We've been very reactive on our enterprise in terms of how we do things with selling consumables and maybe spare parts and kits and so on and so forth, reagents, if you may, to our install base of equipment owners and laboratories. But we get the sense that we're actually not tapping into what we ought to be doing. And so I asked him, I said, so, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to go about it? And he's saying, our first exercise is to figure out what the potential opportunities. And the second exercise is to figure out what the wallet share is. And the third part is going to be figure out how to activate it. So I was like, interesting. And then coincidentally enough, we actually have a review with one of our customers this Friday, where the subject matter is exactly the same thing, which is how do we calculate wallet share of what we have today? So, voila, here we go. We have this topic today, how to maximize wallet share, because we've now come across this not just twice in the last week, but very often recently. So that's kind of what led us to start building on some of these topics. So just to kind of get this thing going. So when I think of the conversation I had with this prospect last week and the conversation we're going to have with our customer this week, everybody gets really overwhelmed by the task at hand. Because if you think about most companies, they got tens of different models, if you may, out there, equipment types out there. They got tens of thousands, typically customers and install base units in the field. And each of these units has multiple, if not tens, if not hundreds of part numbers that are out there potentially that could be sold to their customers. So everybody's looking at this vast expanse of things to go do, and they freeze. So my recommendation always like, nope, it's going to be overwhelming, so don't. Kind of make it very simple. As the old saying goes, how do you eat an elephant? One small bite at a time. So start there. Just figure out how to kind of shrink the surface area and start going from there. So that's what I want you to take away. Just start small. Don't get overwhelmed. The second thing I want to say is, look, no matter what you do, you're going to be wrong, or at least not completely accurate. So let's get this thing directionally correct. Let's get this thing in the right zip code, if you may, in terms of what the calculation ought to show you, which is really the calculation not for the sake of calculation, but calculation for the sake of action. So get that part going, make sure it's good enough to start driving action and get meaningful results. And then thirdly, what I say to get meaningful results, you got to start doing this with as we say, friendlies, right? You got to rig the vote, get people who believe in this idea, who believe in this approach, who are going to give you great feedback, constructive feedback versus saying this stuff is useless, it doesn't work, and it kind of started enlisting them in your endeavor to kind of get things going. So that's really what I would say are the three main takeaways for you guys, which is the way to think about it. What I'm going to do in the next few pages is kind of walk you through some ways we go about doing this with our customers and clients, and kind of give you some tips and tricks, if you may, about how to do. So this webinar today, this Transformation Thursday, is more like a how-to than anything else. So with that, I'm going to dive into some of the background in terms of why this becomes such an important topic and why this is such a complicated topic. So, if you think of all of us who are on the call today and all of us who work in this industry, most machines we make and sell are pretty complicated things. They can have, as I said, anything from a few hundred to a few thousand part numbers in the bill of materials. And what's worse is that each of these machines winds up used incredibly differently, right? So you have a variety of use cases, right? So if you think of a laboratory environment, you can have a forensic lab or academic lab, a food lab, pharmaceutical lab, you name it, all kinds of things out there. You have people who maintain and operate these things differently. You have some companies that just let it run till it drops and dies. Some companies are really good about proactive and predictive maintenance and want to make sure they take systematic downtime to fix things. And so you have people in all kinds of camps. And then finally, because you have all these differences and the big bill of materials, things are wearing out, things are being used, things are being consumed at different rates. So when you start looking at this timeline below, which is once the equipment is sold all the way to the retirement of this equipment, there's so many events that happen. So how do you really keep track of it? How do you really calculate the potential, right? So this problem becomes really, really insurmountable. And so the way I think about it is going back to what I said to you in my first takeover, which is, start small, start easy. So the way we've framed it and the way we typically wind up with our implementation with the customers is like, hey, let's make sure we help you size the price first, right? What is the potential out there? And we'll kind of walk through some examples there. The second thing, when you figure the potential out, you got to try some experiments out, right? No matter what you do, you got to go test it in the field, make sure you know what's going to work and what's not going to work, and kind of get that going. And, with every single experiment, the next step is also validation. Make sure the stuff, what you're learning, what you're doing kind of makes sense. If not, the next step is fix it, adjust the process, adjust your calculations, adjust your methodology, and go from it. And then when you've got some confidence that you know what you're doing, then you start scaling up, right? Again, this is not rocket science, but you'd be surprised how many people don't follow the basic steps. So start simple, start small. This is again an example. You'll see some sanitized results later on, but there's again a packaging manufacturer, weirdly enough. We've been working with them as a European company, and they had the same problem. They had this massive install base of products out there, geographically spread all over the world. And they're saying, okay, I need to figure out how to do this thing. So like we always do, we said, look, there's two ways to look at it. You can go across an entire install base to calculate it across the entire population of parts and consumables that you have, or you can start taking a bite-sized chunk and go figure it out. So in this case, we basically took 10 different part numbers, which accounted for a decent amount of volume that they see today. And we said, let's go ahead and calculate that entitlement, if you may, on that. So we took this data from these 10 parts. We understood, based on historical information, what's going on in terms of usage rates and so on and so forth. We kind of started calculating the replacement intervals, and therefore over the life of the asset. In this case, these machines lasted about 15 years. We kind of did the calculations, and then we said, okay, now let's take it on a subset of their customers and subset of the install base on the left-hand side. So we were able to take this and bound the problem, and more importantly, bound the problem in a way that we were able to go in the next stage, test it, right? So we were able to kind of build an agile environment where, as we got this information, we were able to get some information from the reliability engineers. We were able to get some information from the field engineers, kind of make sure this thing makes sense, the data we got. And then more importantly, in the install base, we were able to go figure out how to start testing it out, right? So that's kind of the first step we did out here. As you notice on the right-hand side, we recognized pretty early on that there's a subset of the entire parts population that we just simply couldn't get to. So there's almost like 28% we weren't able to get to. But my point to the customer is like, look, 82% coverage is better than zero. 82% coverage is better than 50%. So let's at least start finding a way to get to 82% before we get discouraged by everything else. So once we got that math done, once we got the calculations done on the replacement rates by either talking to reliability engineering, quality engineering, or just doing math on the replacement rate data we saw across time, we were able to then take that information and apply it to different ways to kind of test it. In this case, we did it in three different ways. We actually did geography. We focused on Europe. We took a particular class of machines, and we took, I think, the pharmaceutical industry in this case, because they provided packaging to pharma companies as well. So we took these three things, and we started doing the selling opportunity identification, which is to say that if I know that my wallet share is low for a particular part number, can I go back and understand when the next selling opportunity is and go identify it specifically and go work with the sales and service people to go sell it to that, either in the geography in this industry. So in this case, it could be a particular machine in Europe in the pharmaceutical industry, right? So we're able to kind of go build that out in a way that became a good action plan, and then go test it out. And we were able to kind of start looking at different ways to test out these different models and kind of make sense of them and start doing it. We got some results, as you can expect it. In some cases, we had high wallet share, some cases low wallet share. But the intent was to say, can we go figure out how these things would work? And then the idea was to go work, in this case, with an inside sales team and some field sales and service people to go literally go knock on doors and confirm indeed that that particular customer had maximized their value with us. So that particular customer was literally, we weren't even on the approved vendor list, right? And so those are the things you start discovering it. But that's a bit resource intensive. It takes time because you have to get the right people at the right mindset, go talk to the customer, get their feedback back, and so on and so forth. But the other way we started looking at it is saying, hey, get some information. We're going to go back test it with the data we already have. The beautiful part about these entitled models is we can say, this is what we ought to get, right? Based on replacement rates and consumption rates. But luckily in this case, and in fact, most cases with our customers, we have anywhere from 10 to 15 to 20 years of data. We can actually go back and back test that information saying, we should have seen 10 replacements. Did we get 10 replacements? We got 6, we got 7, we got 5. Great, we can actually calculate wallet share, right? So you don't necessarily need to go to the field, but you can also do some back testing from the data you have. But it requires a bit of data science capabilities that many companies don't have, but it's actually eminently doable. And I'd argue that that's a better and cheaper way to test out your hypothesis, test out your ideas before you go to the field. So maybe you do the testing and then go to the field, or you can do both in parallel, right? So validate these results based on either analytics or based on real life testing in the field. Once you do that, then you can go back and fix the methodology, right? So do we need to calculate variables differently? Do we need to do some, did we over index in a particular kind of machine? Did we wind up assigning too much weightage to a particular event, and so on and so forth? Because these models that people wind up calculating, these replacement rates, can be both good and bad. So for example, many years ago when I was working in an instrumentation company, weirdly enough, we were making these instruments that were sold for external environments. And so we had to have reliability data in sub-zero temperatures, reliability data in 120-degree temperatures, and reliability data in California, which is 75-degree daytimes, right? So we had to figure out which part do we weight this reliability on. And so you wind up with different results. So you have to have some estimates, you have to have some understanding for what it is you're really trying to do with it, which in my mind is selling. And so then make some adjustments based on common sense, based on results. And if you realize that there's some models or some things that just don't make sense, just drop it and move on, because life is not about perfection. When you get through this process, when you get through this exercise with these 10 part numbers with a small handful, then you can say, I am going to go start making this thing expand across the board, right? In this case, we went from A to K, which is 10, 11, 12 part types and different buckets. We're able to now start testing out lots of different things over time. And we started looking at what the opportunities could be for each of these events, each of these part numbers. So when you go back on the right-hand side of the column, we can tell you what the potential was, right? What the wallet share potential was. But more importantly, we were able to say, look, if these are the opportunities, how do you maximize it? What are the tactics you use? And so what I didn't show in this presentation today is we actually worked with our customer to develop marketing campaigns, to develop call scripts, to develop service scripts, which is to say that when a service tech went into the customer's location, what could she or he tell the customer, and we're able to start identifying what's the best way to go at this potential value that we identified out here as a way to get off the install base and get after maximizing the wallet share, right? So there's simple systematic ways to do it, but it's a question of breaking it into digestible chunks to get after it. So that's kind of how I wanted to frame it today. Again, this is one of those simple, quick how-to transformation Thursdays. And I think the point is that once you do it, once you get past it, then you're going to wind up having to measure it. So remember I told you we're going to have a conversation with one of our customers this Friday. Well, I had my team try to anonymize some of these things. You see these blurry things on the left-hand side. We're building out dashboards to validate some stuff and start measuring activity. So we have these wallet share dashboards we create for our customers. We share with them, and then we start confirming that what we see in these columns out here is correct. So in this case, if you look at this, there's two in this first case, second line, there's 25 locations with 226 assets. There's an opportunity to basically triple the market share, right? Which basically says they must be getting no more than 20, 25%, or maybe 30% of the wallet share that they can get. And so the idea is to triple. In this case, 1176, I can't even figure out how the math works. It's probably such a low number that it's probably meaningless at this point. But the idea is that you start looking at this information and start deciding what to go focus on, what to go fix, and as you say, rinse and repeat, right? So these are dashboards many of our customers like to use. This is now standard in our product because almost every single one of our customers wants to look at the wallet share, and we start calculating on these things. So the way we've done this stuff, by the way, bringing this back to Entytle now, is fundamentally the calculations that we showed you, the approach we showed you is how we do it, except we do it by cohort or segments or clusters of customers, right? Because we want to start clustering like behaving like using customers in each bucket, and then we start measuring how those customers ought to perform versus how they're performing. And that's fundamentally the outline of what we do. We can then start dividing customers into different behavior buckets, different usage buckets, and then treat them in different ways, right? So the people at the bottom, probably you're losing every single thing to your customer, to your competitor. You may or may not want to waste your time. The middle part is probably where you think you can win some and start focusing on. And the top guys are the ones you do a lot of TLC and make sure that you never lose share from those guys, right? So there's lots of different ways to do it. Obviously, now the next slide or two is just a advertising for Entytle in the sense that that's fundamentally what the intellectual property Entytle has been built on. The intelligence that we've baked into it, the predictive analytics, the AI and machine learning algorithms that we built into it really make all that measurement, all that calculation, all that identification easy. The install-based platform called Insights is really what we do. And it's, as always, I'd like to show you a few of the customers that we have who use us more frequently, in the predictive side. But there's different ways to calculate wallet share as well. And they almost every one of our customers is fundamentally focused on driving wallet share growth. With that, I'm going to end with the last couple of slides that I always do, which is, we believe in the approach because simply we believe that the install base that you have developed over time is probably one of the most valuable things you've done. You need to find ways to unlock the value. And everything we're doing in Entytle today, in the past, and going forward is all about automating these workflows so you can start delivering value to the install base. With that, I think I kind of wrapped up the session today pretty quickly in about 15 minutes. With that, JW, over to you for Q&A.
Beautiful. Thank you, Vivek. And did get a couple of good questions here for you. So to start off, how does customer loyalty correlate to wallet share?
So we have this concept called customer loyalty that's embedded in our application, and it's completely tied to three elements: recency, frequency, and monetary value of the transaction. So with a high loyalty score, it means one or all of them are pretty high. And so there's always an estimation that says, like, if you have a high loyalty score, you're generally getting a reasonably good share of the wallet, not a very high share, but much better than everybody else. So it's a relative score, but compared to the rest, you're getting a better share of wallet. And obviously, the people with lower loyalty scores, we're getting less even relative to the overall population. So it's a score that's tied to the overall population. So it's almost directly tied, direct correlation, JW, to loyalty score and wallet share.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Next question. Could you describe any key differences between wallet share and customer lifetime value?
Hmm. So wallet share is calculated based on the customer lifetime value, except the lifetime value can be segmented by horizons of time or different kinds of segments that you want to do. So the math that we were trying to do, if you may, in the early part of the calculation was across the entire lifetime of the product. How many times should you expect a part to get replaced or a consumable to get bought or a service to get performed? And over the lifetime, we can calculate what we in Entitle call an entitlement value, right? That's kind of the term. That's why the company is called Entitle. That entitlement value is a total bucket of money available to the OEM to go get, right? To go win. And then we say, of that total bucket, how much did you get? And we can, like I said, we can measure it across the entire life cycle, or we can measure it in every year or every temporal horizon that you have. So we may say, look at the entire life cycle and say, we know, for example, in year one or year two or year three, how much you ought to get based on part failure rates or age of life, service that needs to happen, and so on and so forth. And we can measure it according to time horizon or across the entire thing. And we can apply them in both ways. But you have to understand at the outset the lifetime value or temporal value of that asset in the aftermarket before you can do the wallet share calculations.
Very cool. Thank you. One more right now. I think you'll get some good mileage on this one. In competitive markets, what challenges might companies face when trying to expand their wallet share?
You know what we've seen in competitive markets, and these tend to be very much commodity oriented aftermarket parts or commodity oriented consumables. We find that this winds up being almost a race to the bottom on pricing, right? So in a competitive market that just says, look, either your competitors or third parties are providing the same, if not similar, product or service at a probably different price. Most OEMs we work with tend to have premium pricing. And if you are in a competitive market, you lose a lot of share. I mean, there's no way around it. Now, the question is, there's going to be a segment of your customers who are not that price sensitive. And so the question is, can you go find them? Can you go identify them much easier than you would find the completely price sensitive ones? My advice to customers always like, look, there's a percentage at the bottom that you're never going to go get. So don't even waste your time on them. Go find the ones that you can sell value to, who are willing to pay a slightly higher price, not the complete premium price, but slightly higher price, and go win them back. And it's not an easy battle, I can tell you that. We've seen customers who take months of prospecting, months of selling before somebody's willing to get away from an utterly low-priced provider. So I think it's not an easy one, and I think we've seen that in especially more commodity-oriented parts and service markets where this becomes an issue.
Okay, and one more quick one. Can this be done through spreadsheets or does it require a specific tool?
The short answer is if you just have a very small installed base and a really small basket of parts, just do spreadsheets. You don't need to make complicated stuff happen, right? Fit for purpose, right? Small install base, small basket of parts, spreadsheets are perfectly fine. The complexity as you start getting larger, as you start having multiple product lines with massive bills of materials, spreadsheets kind of break. And more importantly, the spreadsheets breaking is the work will have to get divided amongst many of us, right? JW, you'll do something, I'll do something, some other colleagues will do something. And then how do you reconcile all those spreadsheets together? How do you kind of pull it all together to make it actionable? That's where it starts breaking. That's where you really need to wind up having a single tool that everybody can have as a baseline calculation, as well as using it for activating opportunities going forward. So I'd say small size install base, a few products, small bill of materials, spreadsheets are perfectly fine.
Awesome. And got a couple more in actually too. What's the kind of timeline expected to scale up for wallet share capture? And maybe
Wallet
how
share
soon can you
capture,
see
wallet share calculation.
capture, and then kind of
Capture.
how soon can you see results?
So where we wind up is that is every customer, every OEM needs to understand the sales cycle of their products, not just the usage cycle, right? So when you're selling to larger enterprises, when these OEMs are selling to larger enterprises, even if it's a consumable or a part, there's a buying cycle that somebody in operations has to trigger. So I think it just depends on the buying cycle. So just because we've provided, or just because this exercise yielded 1,000 opportunities, can you start seeing results next month? Yeah, maybe if you're lucky, depending on who you're selling to. But we see very often that if you identify 1,000 opportunities, and JW, if I'm selling to a factory maintenance team or an operations team, there's a process they have to go through first. If our estimates are correct, that they agree that yeah, they need to buy some parts or they need to buy service, that's great. Then they need to put it through their approval cycle. Then they need to get it approved and bought. It can be anywhere from 1 to 3 months, even if it could be for trivial amounts of money, right? So that's the part of the issue that we run into most of the time. So we always counsel customers to say, hey, maybe as part of this exercise, maybe going back to the start small, start simple, find places or find parts or consumables or services that are short cycle, as we call it, right? Things can be sold and bought very quickly, so you can start seeing quick results. On a broader scale, where we see the results are, it takes at least a good month or two to start seeing the first dollars trickle in. If you're lucky, it'll happen very quickly. But I'd say a month, month and a half is very normal before the orders start trickling in.
Awesome. For the time being, those look like all of our questions. Any closing remarks, Vivek?
No, I think the closing remarks to me are just what I said in the takeaway slide, which is, look, this stuff looks hard, and it can be if you want to make it hard. Just boil it down to the simplest level of things you can do. If it means you start with spreadsheets, to your question earlier, start with spreadsheets. The main thing here is not calculating wallet share for academic reasons, but it's to start driving sales and service and marketing. So find places where you can actually take that and make it work into dollars. And then really, the word agile is misused, overused, but in this case, I'd like to use it. Have an agile approach, which is put something in the field, get feedback, rinse, repeat, keep moving forward. So that's really the closing remarks I have today.
Excellent. Well, as always, thank you so much for all the insights. To our audience, thank you for attending. And with that, we'll close up. Look forward to seeing you all next week.
Excellent. Thank you, JW. Thank you, everybody, for participating tonight. Good day, good night. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.